1.8 R18A2, R18Z1 140 horsepower. 90% of 8th generation Honda Civics in both body styles are equipped with a 1.8-liter engine. Here we note that this engine is conditionally eternal, it has no serious problems, and death occurs only due to fake oil and overheating, which happens due to the owner's oversight. There are points that you should pay attention to and not skimp on. We have already talked about engine mounts. After another 200,000 kilometers, you will have to spend about $250 on an original hydraulic drive belt tensioner for attachments. The replacement work must be entrusted to a qualified technician so that there are no problems with unscrewing the mounting bolt. And so that later this bolt does not break off somewhere along the way. There are such cases. The timing chain lasts about 300,000 kilometers, but thermal clearances should be checked every 70,000 kilometers. They are adjusted using a wrench and a screwdriver. 1.3 LDA2 Hybrid 95 horsepower. All other 8th generation Civics, but only in sedan form, are equipped with a hybrid powertrain. It is based on a 1.3-liter naturally aspirated engine with a timing chain and 8 spark plugs, and instead of a flywheel, there is a small electric motor. The torque is transmitted to the wheels by a variator. The hybrid system is reliable in Japanese style. When purchasing and operating, you can diagnose each cell of a high-voltage battery. If necessary, drained batteries can be bleeded, and dead ones can be replaced. Also, if you have a hybrid Civic or want to buy one, we recommend reading tips on how to operate this car on the internet so that the batteries last longer. The tips are simple. We advise you to follow them. Well, we don't find any other power units on the 8th generation Civic. Yes, somewhere there are 2-liter Type Rs, and even less common are diesel versions with a 2.2-liter engine. Let's move on. The 8th generation Honda Civic with automatic transmission is a sedan only. This will be a 5-speed automatic with a torque converter, but there are no planetary gears in it. This transmission is the development of Honda engineers. We can say that it is a hybrid of an automatic transmission and a manual transmission. But don't be alarmed, this transmission works great and lasts a long time. By the way, we have a disassembly of such a unit. The 8th generation Civic 2-pedal hatchbacks are equipped with a 6-speed manual transmission. Robot, this is a regular manual transmission with a regular single-plate clutch, only the gears are switched by servos. This transmission is neither quick nor durable. It can't stand aggressive driving and wears out the clutch when standing in a traffic jam for a long time, so it's better to put it in neutral yourself. Over time, the brushes in the electric motors of the actuators wear out, and the gears will be switched off while driving. Due to a faulty actuator, the engine will not start, but usually it comes to life after temporarily disconnecting the battery terminal. This transmission needs to change the oil more often to avoid more serious problems. The 8th generation Honda Civic suspension is stiff, simple and very reliable. The original front stabilizer links and bushings most often have to be replaced once every 80,000 kilometers. The rods will cost $60, and the bushings will cost $9. The front suspension arm assembly is priced at $430, but its ball and silent blocks last at least 200,000 kilometers. There are substitutes at prices 3 times cheaper. The original rear silent block can be purchased separately for $160. Licensed analogs are 3 to 5 times cheaper. The support bearings of the shock absorber struts are able to travel the same 200,000 kilometers because they are a decent size and well protected from dirt. Original bearings cost $80. It is not so rare that with mileages of less than 200,000 kilometers on the 8th generation Civic, the axle shafts wore out, both their CV joints and the splines on the outside. This is not a cheap part. The cost of the original drive assembly can reach $1,000. Original CV joints cost $300 separately. There is a small selection of replacements. The steering rack on the 8th generation Honda Civic began to knock after a mileage of 150,000 kilometers. But there is nothing scary or expensive about knocking. Standard repair, replacement of worn bushings. Moreover, it is better to install a bronze bushing on the right side, which will significantly increase the service life of the rack without knocking. The rear suspension of the 8th generation Civic is based on a torsion beam. Its 2 silent blocks are not originally sold separately, but they serve for a very long time. If you need to change them, then a good non-original one will come to the rescue at a price of up to $40 a piece. The rear springs on the Civic 8 are rather weak. They sag early and deeply and cannot support the normal weight of cargo and passengers on their shoulders. They can be replaced with original springs from the American modification of the Civic C. They should be paired with original shock absorbers from the same version. Fans of the 8th generation Honda Civic consider the corrosion resistance of the body to be the main drawback of this car. On the outside, corrosion appears on the edges of the rear arches. Moreover, its source grows from within. Another unpleasant swelling appears on the roof panel directly above the windshield. Corrosion also appears around the fuel filler flap, on the sills, and at the joints of the door frame parts. In general, all areas with chipped paint become victims of bugs after exposure to moisture and reagents. It is imperative to monitor the bottom and wheel arches. Corrosion develops most intensively there. The rear body reinforcements, such as side members, to which the trailing arms of the rear suspension are attached, are ready to turn into dust. In general, anti-corrosion protection of the Civic body is literally a mandatory recommendation if the car is operated in regions where salt and other reagents are not spared in winter. The perimeter of the hatchback body is protected by plastic linings, as if it were a crossover. These plastic covers cannot withstand forceful contact. For example, door sill covers may partially snap off when they come into contact with a curb or the ground. The wheel arch covers also begin to peel away from the metal when removed carelessly or when driven into a snowdrift. All these moldings do not crack on the outside, only their fastening pins break off and are molded for them from the inside. In a good way, you need to change the entire lining. But there are many popular methods: glue, double-sided tape. Some print new pistons and fasteners on a 3D printer, others install screws and nuts instead. This is suitable for wheel arch trims. The front chandelier of hatchbacks becomes cloudy over time, but only from the outside. Cloudiness can be removed by polishing. We note the generally low ground clearance of these cars. Problems with this arise when driving over rough terrain. Traces of contact with the ground, and even with curbs, remain on the lower edge of the bumper. Many Civic hatchbacks have had and continue to experience problems with water appearing in the trunk. If the trunk floor is constantly wet and drops are visible on the lower section of the glass, then water seeps through the spoiler glued to the rear stack. Usually it is enough to add sealant from the outside along the entire top edge of the spoiler, at the junction with the glass. If water accumulates in the niche under the spare tire, then it gets here in different ways. It is necessary to spill water and check in order the seals of the rear lights with the body, the seals of the rear door wiring harness, the joint between the roof panel and the rear door opening. The mentioned joint is located under the plastic spoiler and is coated with sealant at the factory and painted in body color. Over time, this sealant dries out and cracks, and begins to leak water. In addition, behind the trunk trim at the level below the lights there are many technological holes covered with plugs. If any plug disappears, then water enters the trunk niche through the holes. The standard trunk stops, both originals and replacements, are rather weak. Their opening force is insufficient. The ideal replacement for them is the stops from the Citroën C4 Picasso, ML 5756, $20 each. Sometimes these cars have windshield wiper glitches. When the single sweep mode is turned on, they continue to work for several minutes and do not turn off. In this case, you need to remove the entire trapezoid of the wipers with the gearbox, unscrew the plastic cover of the gearbox and clean the contact disc located there. Using this disc, the system sees the position of the wipers. A glitch appears at the moment when the system goes blind. And if the contact completely disappears in this place, then the wipers will not work. But this can all be fixed. You need to remove excess grease and dirt from the disc. In configurations with a servo drive for folding mirrors, this mechanism stops working over time. The problem is a blown fuse in the servo control unit. This block in the form of a small box is located in the mirror itself. On pre-restyling Civics, you can resolder this fuse, i.e. solder a new one. On restyled cars, the fuse is located deep in the block itself, in the sealant filling. Therefore, you have to buy a working unit. You can use a block from a pre-restyling car. On many Honda Civics, the ventilation system fan squeaks due to wear on the motor shaft bearings. A new original fan, 79310 SMGG41, sells for $100. There are many substitutes. By the way, the motor from the Jeep Wrangler, 680041995i, and its substitutes are suitable here. The monochrome display located at the top center of the front panel eventually stops showing all the information. Some of its segments stop working. This problem can be treated by standard soldering of contacts to its electronic board. Literally all Civics also have a problem with the radio itself. First, all the segments on the display begin to light up, then clicks appear in the speakers and it all ends with the radio turning off and on spontaneously. This known problem can now be easily treated by specialists. On the radio board itself, you need to resolder several parts in the audio processor power circuit. The Honda logo on the steering wheel wears out very quickly, the chrome layer disappears, and ivory-colored plastic appears. Surprisingly, to achieve this result, it is enough to wipe it 10 times with a regular cloth. The emblem can be picked out without any problems and replaced with a new one, which can be bought from China. You can do the same with worn parts on the parking brake handle and gear lever. The Honda Civic engine is suspended on 3 supports. The 2 upper supports look like rods. They have rubber dampers, silent blocks. These original supports cost $130 and $190. The right lower support with a hydraulic damper costs about $200. There are plenty of substitutes, but among them there are literally no parts with good quality or service life. Either their dampers will burst prematurely, or there will be a lot of vibrations during engine operation. By the way, in order to save money, craftsmen buy a less than ideal mount from a BMW engine or design a right-hand hydraulic mount based on a mount for a Peugeot engine.